Hi everyone. So today I'll be discussing the conclusion of the Max Park Big Cube Practice Experiment and what I truly believe is the best way to practice big cubes and to improve. So there are three key components. You have fluidity, you have efficiency, you have selection. I'm also going to put something called a little bit of TPS over here, since it's related to fluidity, but not exactly the same thing. However, chances it falls under the same practice category. Okay, so what exactly do I mean by fluidity? So I'm referring to pauses, number of pauses, length of pauses, lockups, so on and so forth. Now, what am I referring to by efficiency? I'm saying number of pieces solved in one go, and 2 is fewest moves. So not really FMC, but fewest moves to solve a given case, and I'm also going to say speed required. So that's finger tricks. Now for selection, this is mainly just what to solve first. So, big idea here is we want to make sure we improve in each of these three areas, and usually improving in one area of these three will cause a consequence of the other. Now, just to kind of give an example, someone like Max Park, he has very high fluidity, decent selection, and poor efficiency. Someone like Kevin has excellent efficiency, decent selection, and poor fluidity. Felix is actually pretty balanced. He's fluid, he doesn't pause much, he chooses good cases, and he does them well. However, he doesn't really have much TPS. And I believe this is deliberate because he wants to make sure that he's good in all of these categories. And I'll explain why this is related to fluidity and why it's not exactly why Felix is in the situation he is. Okay. So the next thing is how to improve in each of these areas. So for fluidity, right, you want to make sure that you don't pause. How do you not pause? You solve what you see, and you solve things in ways, so use certain moves that will allow you to look ahead better. In other words, moves that don't affect many pieces. So let's say, I can solve something in RU with my centers, and I want to make sure that this side doesn't get affected, because my next case will be over here. So I can look ahead well. And as for turning, that often just comes with doing slower turning. To reduce your lockups, you want to turn slower and build up a good turning style. This often comes from practice, but also comes from making move choices that will allow you to make better turns. So Felix is a great example of this, where he optimizes his rotations. I should probably add that in there, so that he doesn't really have to keep looking around and keep catching as he's doing so. Now for efficiency, this is what I've been working on for years. This is probably the best part of my solves. And what this means essentially is that you spend a lot of time with the cube without a timer. So it just means sitting there with your big cube and just seeing, what can I solve and how can I do it. So one big thing I do for efficiency is looking at beyond bars, solving, let's say, like 3x1s and 7x7 to build this 3x5 block. Or a very common thing on 6x6 centers almost every time is I do these 2x2 blocks, 2x1s, sorry, and that often creates good cases. But there are also some very interesting kind of variations on this efficiency idea. So, for instance, on your last four edges, you will choose cycles versus doing slice of slices to optimize move count. And I'm actually going to be talking about how this relates to fluidity and pauses right in a bit. So you will choose, like which cycle to do or which edge to solve, and rather have a better knowledge of what a good case looks like. You will know how to solve a case well. thing with efficiency is it's probably the most fundamental of these 3 tips, and I would recommend that if you want to get into big cubes, you need to be efficient, because if you're not efficient, fluidity means nothing, and selection is impossible to do. You can't select without knowing efficiency. So, yeah, and also your last 2 centers. This is kind of key. So selection is essentially once you know how to solve good case. Like, let's say I get a given case, I know how to solve it well. Once I have kind of a bank of tools for efficiency, then I can choose which one is best at a given time and see how solving one will affect others. So to improve selection, really, this kind of is a combination. One is making sure you build your efficiency, making sure you have this kind of bank. And 2 is really, to make sure that when you are doing these untimed solves, sometimes don't focus as much. Once you feel you have kind of a bank of being efficient, you have like a bank of tricks then you can go ahead and in these solves look at how to choose good cases. So I'm going to put a little note here. This one is all about timed solves, and this one is all about untimed solves. And this one is you take untimed to timed solves. And the idea behind this is, I see what's best on the solve time. So we're now gonna see how we're gonna balance these 3 and the problems that can arise. So I think a big example of efficiency and fluidity is last 4 edges. So Kevin Hayes has this video on 6x6 last 4 edges where he has a very fixed way of doing it. You have to pause for a couple of seconds, see what to do, and if you will kind of fly through it after. You will be choosing good options, but it requires a big pause. And rather that pause, with that pause, you could also just be solving edges individually. So you want to, when you have a certain level of efficiency, right, you may not be as fluid because you'll be pausing to make sure you recall how to solve a given case. So I'm going to say the issue here is to do with the fact that you can recall. This is the negative. You cannot recall. With these 2, it's more like you cannot recognize. So you choose like a case, but you're contemplating rather which one should I do. And this is more of a bigger issue. So this is a large issue, because the more time you have to look at the cube, right, the more likely you are to see something nice. Like, let's say 15 seconds, a very obvious example is your 15 seconds of inspection in 3x3, you are limited to that. You can see 1-2 pairs tops, but if people have done speed blind, and that's a very extreme example of this, but idea is you can't recognize in time, and this is probably the biggest issue. And between efficiency and selection, obviously, you're gonna, the more this kind of builds into this. So this is a building block. So the idea is you don't really give up on selection by being more efficient. I guess sometimes what could happen is you see something new, you'll learn something fancy you can do, and you don't really see how it affects the rest of the pieces. So I'm just going to say, make sure to check long-term effects. So kind of in FMC, right, you would find a good like Petrus block, but then you wouldn't really have a good last layer case. So that is kind of one thing that's important. But more importantly, this builds onto this. You need to know this in order to do this. It's like learning algorithms and then learning how to do finger tricks with those algorithms. This one isn't much of an issue, and to overcome this, it really just takes practice. This right here will just take solves. So this recallment comes with timed solves, and making sure you stop to recognize. So we kind of left with this one big issue here called recognition. And I feel this is kind of where, this is fundamentally what is hard about big cubes, what makes them challenging, and where I still feel there's more room to kind of develop, which is recognition of cases. You are aware of what a good case is, you are aware of what, how to solve it, but at the very top level, it is where do I draw the line? And this is exactly where this MaxSpark experiment comes in. And this is where kind of what I've been developing recently. So this is going to be more of a ramble from here. So my couple of things I realize is for my first 8 edges, it's really important to maintain good fluidity, since there isn't too much inefficiency. You can't really be efficient during your first edges. So fluidity is really important, but at the same time, you want to choose good edges. However, in my experience, I was better with selection than I was with fluidity. So one thing I started doing is I filter a bit more. If I can't see a good edge at the beginning, I will go for something white or yellow, and I will be able to, usually white, honestly, if I don't see something good. And I will just start that way, and eventually I might see something good, and then go for that, and then towards the end, it becomes less of an issue. So something like filters, right? Obviously, you compromise on moves, but it allows for fluidity. That is one mechanism I have used. Another kind of mechanism I use for 5x5 is switching into cycle position. So doing RU, R2. And that allows me to be more fluid. However, it compromises on efficiency because a lot of the times you will have like an MU2 case, which you will be able to solve a lot faster. However, this will allow me to do things more smoothly. And as a result, I will resort to the mechanism if I feel I am not in the best shape to look ahead. Yeah, that's another big thing, which is just a little note here, mental state. Make sure you're aware of your mental state. So I'm going to say awareness. And rather see how that's going to affect what choices you make. So for centers, I realized that for efficiency, there is a lot of creative stuff you can do. And in my opinion, my fluidity was not as important in that phase. So in my solves, I will pause a lot more during centers to make sure I can find a good case. And the selection will lead to this efficiency. So I will make sure I really have my kind of gears tuned towards finding a good case, even if it means pausing. Whereas during my first 8 edges, I will make sure to just not stop turning. And rather, my point of sharing all of this is rather not to say what to do, but rather because this recognition part is, I feel, what makes things so hard, as I just built up how to get here, and what I feel differentiates a solver who's averaging, let's say, 230 to someone who's averaging 150 on 7x7. It's all about this. You really need to see what's best for you. So the key thing with recognition is do what's best for you. Now, what does TPS mean? TPS is kind of a fourth branch that goes on top of all of this. However, the practice method for TPS is similar to that of fluidity, which is just doing time solves and slowly increasing it to make sure these other 3 don't go out of hand. And rather, it is like a fourth pillar, but I would say this is more like a bit of a push. This is more like kind of adding lube to your cube. That's it. Lube to your cube. To cube for speed. Essentially, you want to make sure your cube is controllable, but fast. And the idea behind TPS is you want to make sure you have this triangle solid, at least be close to the center, and slowly, as you feel, you are not improving but are balanced, you will want to start turning faster as you will be ready. So take it as you're ready. Take it in time. So yeah, that is kind of the big deal with this. Just to summarize my improvement ideas. So the most important thing is to practice big cubes. You really want to practice each of these 3 components individually, rather rotate between them. Generally what you do is you focus more on these 2 during the off season, and during the on season you really focus on fluidity and really making sure you add that TPS to your solves, which will just, these 2 will go hand in hand to some extent. And you want to do untimed solves, staring at the cube, and really knowing this well. I'd say this is probably the most important. This is what you need to get even half decent into cubes. And this will give rise to selection, which I'd say is probably the most advanced of the 3. So I'm going to put a little note here, advanced. And what this will do is it will build up to your selection, which you will take these untimed solves and slowly start timing them. You will see slower results, but you will see what level of efficiency is good for you. And this is going to lead into your fluidity, which is kind of what your goal is. When you go for official solves, when you go for striking really good attempts, you want to make sure that you don't pause and you are confident and you are able to do your solve well. And this is you will need to do time solves and take measures that may compromise on these two, but will be just right for you. Since you've done so much training with these two, usually the compromise will be less over time. And I guess when it's very much the on season, so like maybe like a month before like nationals, worlds, things like that, you really want to just start turning faster, since these three pillars are so strong. And I feel that's kind of what I plan to do, and I have seen this method work. I have improved this past summer. For reference, I mainly focused on efficiency when I was averaging over maybe 3 minutes in 7x7. And then as I got closer to like 230, 240, I really started hitting on selection. But recently, I think I can say I'm sub 210 now in practice. I really feel that my fluidity was lacking in myself initially, and it was mainly because I was trying to emulate Kevin, and I, didn't kind of see the full picture. And I think that is something that, I have found a balance for myself, and I'm slowly starting to turn faster, but at the same time, I'm not required to turn incredibly fast. And yeah, I hope this helped, and I'm excited to see what you can all achieve in Big Cubes. Thank you so much for watching.